This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
An interesting phenomenon that we encounter this time of the year is we have 3 consecutive yahrzeits in a row. The 3rd day of Av, the 4th day of Av, and tonight the 5th of Av. 3 of the great all-time Mekubalim. The 3rd of Av is the yahrzeit of Reb Shamshon Me'ashtapoli. Today Shabbos was the yahrzeit of the Ramami Pano, Reb Nachum Azaria of Pano, also one of the great all-time Mekubalim. Reb Shamshon Me'ashtapoli was one of the greatest all-time Mekubalim who lived in the period of Tach V'Tat. In fact, the Ramchal writes that he gave up his life al Kiddush Hashem in order to stop the Gzeros of Tach V'Tat. The Ramami Pano was one of the great proliferators of the Chidushim of the Ramak, as well as the Chidushim of the Arizal that he learned from his Rabbi Yisrael Saruk. And tonight, the 5th of Av, is the yahrzeit of the great Arizal, who is the preeminent disseminator of Kabbalah. And it's interesting that these 3 great Mekubalim are all nifter back to back to back during this time of the year, during the 9 days, could sometimes even Shvush Chabay Tisha B'Av. And we may add, Chaf Gimel Tammuz is the yahrzeit of the Ramak, Rav Moshe Cordovero. So it's quite interesting and certainly of note that so many great Mekubalim were nifter during this time of the year. So perhaps we could suggest an idea. There's a pasuk in Koheles, Parak Yud Beis, pasuk Yud Aleph, Divrei Chachamim Kador Vanois Uchamas Marois Netuim Ba'alei Asufos Nitnu Meiraya Echad, that the words of the sages are like pegs, like nails that are banged in. And the Medrash tells us in Bamidbar Rabbah, Parsha Yadad Ois Daled, that Ema Sahim Netuim Divrei Torah Ba'adam Bizman Sheba'aleihen Ne'asafin Mehem, that the Medrash says, when is the Torah of a Rebbe ingrained and imbued within his student? Not until the Rebbe passes away. As long as the Rebbe is alive, the student says, okay, I don't have to understand completely, I'll ask the Rebbe. But when a person's Rebbe passes away, a person really makes the effort to try to understand the words of the Rebbe because he knows he'll never be able to ask him again. So this is an idea that Reb Tzadok HaKohen elaborates on in the Pri Tzadik Vayikra Lag BaOmer, that Reb Tzadok says there is a very big difference between when a sage of the Torah Shebachsav passes on and when a sage from the Torah Sheba'al Peh passes on. Because if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, when the sages of the Chachmei Torah Shebachsav pass on, be it Moshe, be it Yoshua, be it Aaron, these are days of tainus for Klal Yisrael. And the reason is because when a sage of the Chachmei Torah Shebachsav passes on, it's just a sad day and we have to fast. But when a sage of the Chachmei Torah Sheba'al Peh passes on, their Torah we only have through them. And when they pass on, that is when their Torah was imbued and ingrained within their Talmidim, within Klal Yisrael. As the Pasuk says, Divrei Chachamim Kadar Vanois. And the Medrash says that when the Chachmei Yisrael pass on, that is when their Torah is natua, planted in the hearts of Klal Yisrael. And that is why we find that on the days of the passing of the Chachmei Torah Sheba'al Peh, like the Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, these are days of happiness. But when the Moshe Rabbeinu passed on, or when Yoshua ben Nun passed on, these are days of sadness. Because when it's a Chachamei Chachmei Torah Shebachsav, their Torah is written. We have their Torah. So, on their yahrzeit, it's just the loss of the Chacham. Mashe'en Kain, when it's a Chacham from the Torah Sheba'al Peh, so then we don't have their Torah. We only have their Torah on the day of their passing, when their Torah is now ingrained in the hearts and minds of Klal Yisrael. So we could say as follows. There's a famous passage of the Zohar in Parshas Nasai, one of the most famous passages in all of the Zohar. This is a passage that the Ramchal wrote a whole work on called Adar B'Amorim, and the Zohar says as follows: Uvegin da'asidin Yisrael lemitan mehayilone dechaye ihu sefer Zohar asidin lemipkin migalusa barachame. Since in the future Klal Yisrael will taste of the flavor of the secrets of the Torah, that is the Zohar, they will be redeemed from Galus Barachamim. Which means that in order for Klal Yisrael to be redeemed, we have to taste from the tree of life, which is the Zohar HaKadosh. Now, how will Klal Yisrael be able to taste from this tree, this esoteric body of knowledge? So the answer is, we have to study, we have to learn it, but we have to have Rabbeim. Now, who are our Rabbeim in this discipline, in this branch of wisdom? They are, of course, the Arizal gave over to the world, and the Ramami Pano gave over to the world, and Reb Shamshin Me'ashtapoli gave over to the world, and the Ramak. And therefore, the Rebbeinu Shalom, so to speak, was Boirei the Refuah before the Makkah, because before a Tisha B'Av, before that day of Golos, the Rebbeinu Shalom has to pave the way for the Geula. How will we have Geula? Begin the Asidin Yisrael Lamita Mehai Ilana Dechai Iu Sefer Zoyar Yipgun Min Galusa Barachamin. We will be redeemed when we taste of the tree of the Zohar HaKadosh. And we will have that taste through the Torah that is implanted in our hearts on the yahrzeits of these great luminaries, namely the Ramak, and Reb Shamshin Astapoli, and the Ramami Pano, and of course the Arizal. So these Yoima Dehilulas ingrain and implant in the hearts of Klal Yisrael this wisdom, and this will give us the ability to taste a little bit from that tree of life, and in that merit will be Zocha to Geula, and this is the way the Rebbeinu Shalom paves the way for Geula before the day of Tisha B'Av, which is the day of Chorban, as the Rebbeinu Shalom is always Boirei the Refuah before the Makkah. So this is a very ennobling thought as we traverse these days of the Shua Shechabay Tisha B'Av, realizing that the Rebbeinu Shalom is paving the way, because as the Gemara tells us in Tainas, already the Goyim entered the Heichal on Zayin Av. When that is why even those who make Siyumim during the 9 days, we should not make a Siyum on the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th, of course. So before, in advance of the Chorban, beginning on the 7th, the Rebbeinu Shalom already starts paving the way. And Chaf Gimel, Tammuz, Yotzat, and Ramak, on the 3rd of Av, which is the yahrzeit of Rav Shamshin Me'ashtapoli, the 4th, the Ramami Pano, and the 5th, the Arizal HaKadosh, Suchusam Yagein Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.